for joining us on another episode of the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast. I am your host, Lauren Falk, and I am joined today by Ben Shepard, co-director of FC Wisconsin boys side of the soccer club. So thanks for being here with me today, Ben, for our third podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
We're going to be discussing something still important to the performance realm, slightly outside of the sports medicine, sports science, but just as valid. We're going to discuss the chaos of youth soccer and navigating that as a parent, understanding club selection, player development, and all those things that are a part of those decisions that we make as parents for our children early on, and that they also become a part of that decision later on in their career as they develop in this too. So Ben has been on all sides of the coin. He has played collegiate soccer and coached collegiate soccer on many levels. He has coached youth soccer, and he's been on the club side for many years now. So since he has seen this from so many different sides, this really helps us get a bigger picture of our resources available to us, the selections that are available to us, and our thought process that we can go through as we're making those decisions. So thank you, Ben, for joining us today. I look forward to this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. No, it's good to be back on with you.
Absolutely. So why don't you, especially, let's even just use locally within the Wisconsin region, just talk with us about kind of what's all out there.
Wow, what a question that is.
Yeah.
There is.
I mean, we can also ask, why is there with Round? But,
there is.
Club-wise, what are some of the things that we are seeing as parents to make choices from, and what are some of the options that are available to our kids kind of in this area and or general levels of soccer that are available at this time?
Yeah, I think that's probably, but also probably part of the problem is that there is probably way too much out there, right? And I think the amount of misinformation and disinformation that is out there, it makes it so difficult for parents to understand the landscape and to be able to recognize and figure out what is the best environment for their son based on their level and ambition and what they're trying to achieve in the game, right? This is my profession, and I get tied up in knots with all these leagues and everything that's going on right now. And it is a changing landscape all the time as well. So there is a league for anybody that wants to play soccer right now, even in Wisconsin, to be totally honest. There are so many leagues, so many different clubs. There is certainly a level for any aspiring young player to get into the game, which is a good thing, a really good thing. I think as they start to get older, it then becomes, okay, if your son has potential, there needs to be more thought put into and more research done by players and families of where exactly is the best place for my son to develop and improve, especially if he has ambitions to maybe try to play in the college game as they get older. So there's lots of different leagues. Everybody will say their league is the best, right? Everybody has to market their own leagues, and that's just part of the game that we're in, okay?
It's a business aspect of it.
Exactly. And I know people shy away from saying that, but ultimately, youth soccer and youth sports in general now, it is a business. And I think too many people are scared to actually acknowledge and say that, but that is the truth. Now, the key is making sure the club that you go to is a good club that is developing players and is doing the right thing, right? That's the key, okay? Yes, they might be a business, but are they doing things the right way to make sure they're developing good people, first and foremost, that have a potential to be good soccer players, okay? So as they get older, ultimately, and as we approach tryouts right now, I obviously have lots of conversations with parents at different clubs and things like that have interest in us as a club. Ultimately, the two best leagues in the country right now are the ECNL and the MLS Next. They are the two best leagues. If you are a player from U14 and up, okay, these are the two best leagues in the country when all is said and done. You can ask any college coach, those are the two leagues where they're going to be recruiting from. That is where the majority of the best players are, where the majority of the best clubs are. Having said that, there are always good players and good clubs in other leagues as well. So it's wrong not to say that as well, right? But ultimately, these are the two best leagues where the majority of the best players are playing. They're both very good leagues, just different philosophies. The ECNL has been around a lot longer, for 15 years, and that was a league that came about that said, we're going to be the best league that provides the best pathway for players to go play in college, which is what we feel is the most realistic pathway for our players. The MLS Next, which is a newer league, has come about, which again is a very good league. But that really was put together for the benefit of the real MLS clubs, the Chicago Fire, the Crew, Cincinnati, things like that. And that is more focused on that 1% that might go professional, that might not even go to college to play. They might go straight to play professionally with those MLS clubs. So in that league, you're not allowed to play high school soccer. You're not supposed to play other sports. You're not even really supposed to do futsal with another organization. It's just two really good leagues, just different philosophies behind them. For us, we believe that the ECNL was the right platform and the right pathway for us. And it gives our players so much more exposure. And we're able to compete in that league as well, which we think is important and do well. And we feel that league really does a good job of catering more to college coaches, because they know that's what their plan is. Our philosophy is get these kids into college and make sure we're doing everything to help college coaches be able to see these players. So on a bigger picture, as you get older, those are the two main leagues you're probably looking at if you're an aspiring player looking to play in college. But there are other good leagues as well where you can get recruited from as well. So it's important to note that as well, right?
Of course. So within FC structure, we obviously are an ECNL. I say we because I've been involved, I think, for 5 years now. I feel like I'm a part of it at this point. I'm like team mom, kind of. So within ECNL structure, we compete on within FC Wisconsin structure, we compete on the ECNL level. Do all teams under your umbrella compete in ECNL?
No, so within our club, we have different programs, right? So we have the ECNL, we then have the ECNL Regional League, then we have currently it's Elite 64, which is changing the name to the National League Premier, and then we have a regional competitive program. So ultimately, basically, we have 4 levels, 4 platforms within our club, and we have players within all of these platforms. The ECNL, the ECNL Regional League, and the E64. The majority of those players within those 3 programs will probably go and play in college at some level. And the key is to make sure that within all of those programs, we're pushing all of those players relative to their ambitions. So, and there's different levels of players within those programs, but those are our main programs where all of our players are playing in those different leagues.
So it allows for you to get the same high quality instruction, just being in a competitive environment that kind of matches your goal set and skill set.
Correct. Yeah. We consider ourselves an opportunity club where every player has the opportunity to develop at their own rate and at their own pace and grow at their own rate and own pace as well. And within that, they will be placed in the correct program, in the correct platform at any given time. So some kids may develop later than others, and they may start in Elite 64 or RCP at U13, but then come U16, they might have developed to the ECNL RL or the ECNL. We believe as an opportunity club, you should constantly be evaluating players and constantly be moved across platforms and programs based on how they develop. I think that's really vitally important to player development as well.
Absolutely. And I've seen it play out many times for our players, especially even coming back from injury. That's been a very helpful platform to bring people back in the most appropriate manner and have them be where they need to be at that time, which I think is really important. So when you are selecting a club, as you're sitting there, either A, as a parent looking at this yourself for your own child, or B, as you're advising parents, what are some of the things that you walk them through to think about as they are trying to select a club?
So I think parents will always, the first question they probably always ask is, what leagues do your club play in? So you have to talk them through the leagues and the benefits of the leagues. And especially now, as they get older, in the high school ages, the recruitable ages, the league does matter. Okay, it does matter in terms of college recruiting. So the ECNL, ECNL RL is really important if kids want to play in college. Those are good leagues to play in terms of the exposure you get. Right. So as they get older, I think it is naive not to think that the leagues are important in terms of the college recruiting aspect. I also strongly tell players and families, don't just come to us because of the leagues that we play in. Okay, because ultimately, the leagues is just the platform that gives your team the opportunity to play. Leagues don't develop players. It is the clubs, the culture, and the environment that develop players. That's where player development takes place. The leagues are just where you then get to play. That's your platform to play games. Okay, and I think too many players and too many parents and too many clubs as well just sell the leagues that they're in, and they just chase the leagues, right? And for me, it's
Yeah.
yes, the league is a small part of development, but it is really the club, the environment, the culture, and how they do things. That is the most important thing to player development. And that should be the primary reason why you're at a club. The leagues are a bonus. The coach that you might have for a year is a bonus. But leagues come and go, clubs come and go, but the club philosophy and the culture, hopefully that stays the same. Okay. And that's the most important thing, in my opinion, in terms of picking a club, staying with a club, and seeing it through the test of time as well.
Obviously, I mean, there's certain ways to get to know a club, and it's challenging probably at times, especially if you're a brand new outsider. What are some indicators that a parent could look at, or as you're kind of digging into what are these clubs about? Like, how would I, as a parent of a, 10 or 12-year-old kid, totally fresh to this whole scenario, how do I look at your information, engage with your club, and get a sense for what those cultures are like? How do you see that depicted so people can better understand or see those things?
Yeah, I think as a parent, if you're looking at joining a new club, I think you're entitled to have a conversation with the director of coaching, right? To find out, okay, can you tell us about your club philosophy? What's your development style? How do you guys develop players? What's important to you? So I think that's important to talk with somebody at the club who's higher up. But I also think, and there's some rules around this, at the younger ages, there are some rules where you can't just go and train with a team, but you can always go and watch a training session. So at these younger ages, while we may not be able to say, hey, just come to a training session, we always say our training sessions are open to the public. So if you want to come and watch a training session, you're more than welcome to. I think that is huge. Go and watch training sessions and see how a club trains. At the older age groups, especially within the ECNL, because there's different governing body and different rules, we can invite players in to come and train with us. Okay. And we can say, listen, we can tell you how we think our environment is and how good we think our training and culture is, but come and see it. Come and actually experience it and come and train with us. Okay. I think that's huge as well. Being able to see how a club trains and what they do. Because everybody can say their training is great and their culture and environment is great, but actually go and take the time to see it, either watch it or be involved in it. And then I think you can get a sense of what's going on at that club. Okay. I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely. Kind of watching how coaches are engaging, structure of sessions, what the communication is like between coach and player, things like that are very telling on many levels. I'm sure if you went to different places, you might see different experiences and give you a sense of a gut instinct of you as a parent, what fits your child.
Yeah. And when you go and watch a training session, there'll be other parents, milling around, and you can ask them questions of what, we're looking at this club. What do you think about it? What's good? What's bad? And ultimately, parents are always way too honest and will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So they'll give you feedback on their experience with the club. And we try and utilize our parents as well and say, listen, go and talk to our parents, go and talk to players that might have joined us from your old club. Ask them about their experience, how they liked it. I think that's your players and your parents are probably your biggest selling point as a club. So, you need to utilize that as well. And I think because every club will tell you that they're about development, this, that, the other. But then when you probably, as a parent, when you probably push them on it, it's okay, well, what is your development philosophy? And lots of clubs will probably dance around it and say, well, we want to make sure we develop players to their potential and this, that, the other. And for us, it's like, well, we're about a collaborative coaching model. You've seen it being at our training, Lauren, where we want multiple coaches working with teams. We don't want one coach to one team. We want multiple coaches working with teams, working within programs, so kids are getting more feedback, more individual attention, so that more learning is taking place. So that's our development philosophy. We have a collaborative coaching model. It's about getting more coaches around more players so we can impact them better and improve them. So again, that's our development philosophy that we buy into, which we think is, helpful for player development.
It's funny, whenever I do injury screens and I ask a kid, I said, who's your coach? And he's like, Ben, Billy, Tom, Neil. They don't know because so many people are involved in their day-to-day coaching that, I mean, I laugh because this kid has like no idea of who really the main person in charge is, but it's because they are constantly engaging with all these coaches on a regular level. And it just shows that this kid feels responsible to all of those people.
Yeah.
which is kind of cool.
Well, I think it's, we can all say that the kid needs to come to me, the coach, and speak to me. But it's naive just to think that kids struggle to go and talk to coaches, right? It's just the way society is now. So if you've got a group of coaches, hopefully within that group of coaches, there's one coach where they might feel comfortable to go and speak to, right? I think that's helpful as well with mental health nowadays and trying to develop relationships with players. I think that's helpful. Now, for game day, they know there's always a lead coach, right? They know who their lead coach is for games, which is important. So it's not like you go into games not knowing who's coaching you. They know who their lead coach is. But in trainings, there's multiple coaches where you hope that within that group of coaches, there's somebody there that they can develop a relationship with that they might feel comfortable to talk with, which is important as well.
100%. And I've actually seen that many times when I talk to kids about like who they might, want to do some extra drill work with or who they might ask questions of. They definitely have someone that matches their personality, and that's great. And we have a broad spectrum of personalities and skill sets in the coaches at FC Wisconsin, and I totally agree. Each player kind of finds their person, at least one, if not more than that. And I think that's phenomenal. And that's the beautiful part of having diversity of styles and people as coaches in that position. So I love that. So let's pivot a little bit. So, in the world of youth sports in general, I feel like, I'm definitely on the sidelines watching it. You have your kid that scored 10 goals in a weekend and it feels like they're destined for stardom. Is that a given that once my 10-year-old has a solid weekend, that this is a linear trajectory from here till the day he graduates?
The first thing I'll say is you think you're good until you actually see what real good looks like. There is always players out there that are better than you or your son or daughter, right? I think, especially for us in Wisconsin, when we go down to North Carolina and play those teams, sometimes it is a shock for our players and parents of, geez, those kids are good and they're massive, right? So it's always, you think you're good until you see what real good is. Okay. We always use that line. And in terms of development, it is up and down. It is not linear whatsoever. It is almost like the stock market, hopefully not like it is right now, but it is up and down. And your kid is going to go through good moments and bad moments. As a parent, it's easier said than done, but it's trying to stay more on an even keel of just be their support. When they do well, praise them. When they don't do so well, don't chastise them, but try and help them through those difficult moments as well, right? But having an understanding that your kid's development is going to be literally up and down. There are going to be lots of good moments, but also lots of difficult moments as well. And that's okay. That's how they get better as well. It's really important. And players develop at different rates. We've had kids at U13 who maybe were going through growth spurts and struggling, or just maybe really small compared to other players that, were really struggling. But then come U17, they were our best players. Okay. So everybody's development path, everybody's development journey is different. Okay. Which again is why it's important you're at a club that some clubs you get there, you get put on a roster and you're stuck on that roster for 4 years. And there's not enough movement between rosters of players. Okay. At the younger ages, there should be movement of players across rosters. There should, because players are developing at such different rates. So it's important you ask a club, okay, do you move players across rosters? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And do you think that's important to development? And it takes a lot of work from clubs and coaches, but there should be, I'm not saying 6, 7, 8 players, but there should be 1 or 2 players here and there that are moving across rosters from year to year if you're really doing your job as a club by developing players. That is really important. Okay. The other piece, and I always say this to people, is generally speaking, at these really younger ages, so like U9, U10, at these younger ages, very rarely is the gold medalist at these ages the player that becomes the best player. It is normally the silver and bronze medalist kids that are slow burners that develop over time that become the best players. Unfortunately, the gold medalist at U10, U11, a lot of times their development is hindered by the parents and the pressure that's put on the parents, because they've been used to being the best kid at U10, U11, and at some point they'll go through a difficult moment and they don't know how to handle that, and the parents don't know how to handle that. So we're always very conscious of the best player at this age, at U10, U11, U12, we've got to be really careful with this kid, because especially if he's a standout, we need to be really careful, because we know what's coming, and we need to make sure that he understands as a player, the parents understand that he's going to go through difficult moments. And we always use that analogy that, there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but generally that gold medalist at these ages doesn't become the best player. So let's be careful with this kid and make sure he continues to develop and understand he's going to go through difficult moments as well.
Yeah. And I think in general, it's good for every kid and person to learn how to navigate difficult moments for life skills, nevertheless, sports skills. And that's an important thing to have the opportunity to build on that and that be a part of an accepted part of that culture too, and anticipated almost. I reflect on working college soccer and watching, kids that were recruited heavily. Coaches will give you every vote of confidence as they're trying to bring you in as their top player. And then you get there and now it's you against the big dogs and, even stronger competition and more difficult competition. And the thing that separated those kids was whether you were willing and capable of being uncomfortable and knowing how to work hard through it, even on the college level. It's a skill set that needs to be built and addressed and understood that it happens throughout their whole process and allowed them to prepare them for it. Because I watched really good college players flop because that was their biggest hurdle and they didn't know how to overcome it. And the people who did are the ones that soared. You're right. The second and third place guy probably ended up being some of our best players at the end of their 4 or 5 years there. And it's just a very interesting thing to understand, anticipate, and respect and help a parent go through that process as well. It's easy to ride your kids' highs and easy to be frustrated in their lows because, supporting your child, making an investment literally in a club, you're heavily invested in your child's development. And it probably takes a lot of pause to not get overly wrapped up in it and allow the process to occur. Right?
Yeah. And I have so much more empathy towards parents now. Obviously, I have a just turned 10-year-old who plays soccer freshly, and he's okay. Not brilliant, but he's okay. And I have a 7-year-old daughter that plays as well, right? And as much as I tell parents, just be supportive, tell them you enjoy watching him play and this, that, the other. I have broken every rule that I tell parents, right? So, and I should know better. There's times I'm like, I shouldn't have done that, and I have to go back and rectify it. So as much as I'd say it is easier said than done, and I have broken every rule. I did it this weekend, okay, in some regard. So to use a story, my 10-year-old, he, in a game, missed a penalty, right? He missed a penalty. And then for the rest of that half, he came from a good place because he cared, right? He missed it and he was so upset that he thought he'd let his team down, that for the rest of that half, he didn't do anything. Body language was bad. You could tell it was just in his head. He asked to be subbed off. The coach didn't take him off because he knew he was asking to be subbed off because he missed a penalty. And I'll be honest, I was on the sideline and I was fuming. I was like angry, and I'm like, and just sit there, don't say a word. And after the game, he gets in the car, and again, when he gets in the car, I know I'm not supposed to say anything. I'm supposed to just say, let it go. And I broke that rule straight away. So what do you think about the game? And he starts crying and he said, I let my team down. I missed a penalty. And I was like, nope, you didn't let your team down by missing a penalty. You let your team down by how you acted afterwards, in terms of it got in your head. You stopped working. You were pouting. You felt sorry for yourself because you missed a penalty. I said, I don't care that you missed a penalty. I don't care, but I care how you acted afterwards. Okay. So the message was, in my opinion, was right, but it shouldn't have been at that moment. I should have waited until we got home. But I
gotta count ahead to 10 first before you say anything.
Yeah, but I couldn't wait. And I made him, and as a parent, I made a mistake, and then when we got home later, we talked about it, and it was a learning moment. And the next day, he played pretty well. So I understand how difficult it is for parents. You're going to make mistakes. There are going to be times when you say things that you shouldn't. Then it's just important to go back and rectify that with your son or daughter and try and make it a learning experience for them, right? I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. There's a coach of a high school team nearby here that his son actually plays for him and is a goalkeeper and missed a big penalty that affected their ability to go to state. And he said, and obviously high level play for high school soccer and things like that, a lot of pressure on that game. And the dad, who's been a long time high school coach, he always says, my first line to my child, which helps me bring pause to the moment, is also, whatever happened, I love watching you play. Like, ultimately, we as parents, we do this because we want our kids to be happy, successful, and we love watching them do that. And he says, every time I take that moment is a good reminder for him to realize what's truly important in this moment. It lets me collect my thought. And then later on, we'll debrief after we're out of the car.
Yeah.
But, it's true. And that's the thing is like always remembering, why are we doing this? Why are we putting our children in these opportunities and situations? And making sure that our actions and thoughtfulness also supports that growth, and understanding that there's going to be bumps along the way, and we just got to take a deep breath and let them learn from it. And I think that's a good opportunity for everyone to just get a healthy reminder, because like we all said, parenting is the hardest job ever. There's no book, and we've learned as we go. Let's be honest.
100%.
Every day of my life.
I mean, just back to your point, Rob, you were talking about the players that do develop well, right, as they get older. I think for me, the two aspects of important things, as you say, for players and how they develop is, one, it's their ability to listen, okay, and two, it's having resilience. To your point, right? And as parents, as much as you can do, focus on, are they good listeners, and are they going to be resilient? Can they come through difficult moments? And make sure as a parent, you're not taking away all those obstacles that come their way. It's okay for them to fail and make mistakes and overcome things, because that helps them become resilient.
Yeah.
Not just whether they go and play in college or not, just being resilient as a person in life, right?
Yep.
Of dealing with difficult things that are going to happen in your life. You can't control what life throws at you, right? But you can always control how you respond to it. And if you've got that resilience, you can come through difficult moments, whether it's sport, life, whatever. So I do think it is vitally important, the ability to listen and having resilience. I think for me, those are the two core things that us as a club, we have to make sure our players have those two things. Everything else, technical, tactical, whatever, yes, obviously. But for us, these two things are really important. The ability to listen and having resilience. And resilience has to be developed in young players. You have to find the moments to be able to let them fail, let them rebound, get over it. And part of that comes from parents as well, in terms of helping build that resilience in your child.
Yeah, I totally agree. You have to let a kid sit with those uncomfortable feelings and think about what they're going to do with them. Having that ownership to your team when you gave up. That's an important thing to think about, and how that you're, and that's, again, important to your team in soccer, but important in life. And that's why I actually love sports so much, is you learn so many life skills and attributes within a unique structure like that plays out in the long run for sure. So a couple questions for you. So obviously we talk a lot about the structure within a club and how ECNL and MLS Next are really providing a lot of that exposure, to college coaches and things like that. Where does the emphasis of high school soccer play in that scenario?
Yes.
What's your conversation around high school sports as well, especially if you are looking at or already in a program?
Yeah, for me, I think too many people get so caught up into the high school piece in terms of, should my son play high school? Should he not play high school? Is it going to kill his development? I think it's almost become too much. People think way too into it. I'm like, listen, ultimately, on the boys' side at least, the high school season is like 2.5 months. That is it. It's 2.5 months of your son's development. So if he gets ruined in 2.5 months, he probably ain't going to be a great player anyway, to be totally honest. If 2.5 months of playing high school negatively impacts your son's development that much, then that's on him, right? Then that's on him. He's obviously not going to be a top player, okay? For me, there are some very good high school programs, and there's some very good coaches in the high school program, right, where I think it's a really good experience, and you can still improve. There are some high school programs that aren't great either, right? And maybe the coaching's not at the same level of the club, okay? So my kind of thought process and the advice I give people is, listen, are you necessarily going to get tactically or technically better playing high school? Maybe not compared to club, but is it going to be a really good experience where you're playing for your school, you're playing in front of your peers, there's actually fans at the game? And is it going to be, most importantly, fun? Most likely, yes, in most high school programs, okay? And it's going to be a fun experience. where you're playing in front of your school, people you go to school with, in fans, parents, family, and there's a bit of an atmosphere at the games. That's probably the one thing that is missing from the club game is there isn't really atmosphere at the games until you get to playoffs when there's lots of people watching. And you miss that.
Right.
You miss the fact that in high school, you can get loads of people there at your games and it can feel important and you can get energy and a buzz from it, right? You're playing for your school spirit and community. There's something to be said for that as well. Okay, I think that's important. I understand there are some kids that say, well, my high school's just really, really bad. I'm just not going to do it because I'm not going to enjoy it. And I understand that too. If you really don't think you're going to enjoy it, then don't do it.
Yeah.
But I think in the main, people get so caught up with the high school thing. I think it is a time for players to go play, have fun, play with their friends under less pressure. And you're probably going to do more community things that you're going to enjoy as well. And you'll get something out of it. Then you come back to club and you're probably pushed more and it's probably more intense and whatever else. But I think the stress that gets put on kids nowadays, probably more so in club because parents are paying a lot of money for their kid to play in club. I think high school almost gives a bit of a release and a bit of a relief to them to play it. So I do think there's benefits to it as well.
Yeah, I like that. So kind of along those lines of participating with your high school's team, what are your thoughts about multi-sport athletes and that balance, especially from the club perspective?
I always say, first off, because we get asked that from parents, I think first off, our line as a club is, listen, it is not our job to tell you what sports to play. It is our job that when you're with us, we improve you in soccer and improve you as a person. Okay. For me, having grown up in England, playing multiple sports is just the norm. Right. Even with soccer is here, football is here. Every other sport is here, way down the bottom, right? Okay. Football is our main sport by a mile. Okay. But you still grow up playing other sports. I played football, rugby, cricket, tennis, golf. So play multiple sports. Okay. And if you can manage it at the younger ages, for sure, I think it is really good playing multiple sports. So my son he does soccer, he does basketball, and it works well. Basketball in the winter, there's a little bit of overlap, but it works out well. So he does two sports, soccer, basketball. He enjoys both. Very average at basketball, but he enjoys both. And that's good. And I'm okay with that because he's playing a different sport with different people, different teammates. There's different athletic movements involved in both, which he gains benefit from.
Right.
So it's good. I think at the younger ages, if you can play multiple sports, it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. I think there can be times, not for everybody, but times if a kid is just doing soccer from 9 years old and that is it, especially in America, he will burn out. It's different in England and Europe where you're in a pro academy and you're only doing soccer, right? It's different. It's just a different culture. Here, with the pay to play and the pressure of parents and everything else, if a kid is just doing one sport from U9, I think you run a greater risk of burning out. Doesn't mean every kid's going to burn out, okay? But I think you run a greater risk of burning out if you're only doing one sport and you're specializing in one sport from a really young age. I think that is the concern.
Yeah. I mean, studies have consistently showed mental burnout as well as a higher incidence of injury, actually, if you're especially like starting at a young age. Just like you said, being in the multiple different sports, you build all these different physical skill sets that actually make you a more multidimensional athlete. From my perspective, that actually aids in injury prevention too, because then your body's getting a more well-developed process of building your physical skill sets versus constantly going in the same direction all the time, doing the same thing over and over and over and over. So, I mean, there's injury benefits to it. There's mental benefits to it. You need to find your way. And the only way you're going to do it is by having the chance to try things and figure it out. And then once they get older and they decide to specialize or the schedule kind of facilitates that, those are the kids that are actually more truly in it at that point too, if you've given them that time and space to kind of trend in that direction versus stay in that direction from day one.
Well, I think to your point, Lauren, I think clubs have to be careful nowadays now that they are almost overtraining players as well. I think they are, because parents are paying a lot of money, right, for youth sports now and youth soccer.
Yeah.
I think too many clubs are going too far in thinking, okay, we need to offer all of these things then to make sure we are justifying the fees that they're paying. So I was talking to a parent the other day and their club have their U11s training 4 times a week. and then games on the weekend. And I'm like, why? Why are they training 4 times a week? They're 10. They're 9 and 10. I'm like, 3 times a week is more than enough for a U11 team.
Yeah.
You don't need to be training 4 times a week. I mean, in England, 2 years ago, I went into Tottenham's academy and watched them train. Tottenham's academy, they only train 3 times a week. They say you don't need to be doing more than that. 3 times a week is enough, and then they play on the weekend. But
the upper echelons.
Yeah, we feel over here, because parents are paying, we've got to train them 4 times a week. You don't. It's not about how much you train. It's about the quality of your training. Right. So I think that's where I think us as a club, we have to be careful. Other clubs have to be careful. If you're doing the right things and you're not overcharging people, you don't need to justify what they're paying. Just make sure you're giving the best product you can, and you're giving the best training environment, and you're caring for the players. That's the most important. It's not about how much you do. Otherwise, you run the risk of overtraining and burning out these kids as well.
I couldn't agree more. So you kind of touched on this a few times, but obviously we talked about parents are investing in this. There might be expectations or long-term plans that people are putting in their own mindset in this situation. Talk to me about the final portion of this, of managing or giving parents and kids advice on managing the pressure or understanding the pressures that go into this, and maybe a couple of perspectives we can have on that.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, players and parents and possibly coaches as well at times have to not think so much and be so worried about the outcome. If I've got a 12-year-old son, what is the outcome for my son going to be at U18? And constantly be thinking about that. What is the outcome going to be, instead of just thinking about the present and just making sure he's in the right environment, enjoying the game, most importantly, enjoying the game and wanting to go to training and wanting to go to games. And even better, that when he comes home, he wants to go out and practice on his own. The best thing that I love to see from my own kids is when they go out and practice on their own. Okay. And I haven't told them to, they've just gone out and they're out practice on their own. Because that shows me, they love the game. They're not just playing because their dad's a coach and I'm not going to lie, want them to play, right? I want them to play this sport. It's they're out there doing it on their own because they want to.
On their own.
I think that's important, in your kids. And just not getting too focused on the outcome. As players get older, yes, with the whole recruiting process, there becomes stress and what schools are you going to go to and this, that, the other. But even then, I try and spin that and say to parents, listen, I get it. You're stressed out right now because he's talking to 4 schools and you're trying to make a decision, where should he go? And I'm like, how about you look at it this way, that be proud that your son or daughter has done so well that they're talking to 4 schools and they might become a student athlete. Look at it that way as, this is stressful. We've got to figure all this out. But isn't this great that we've got this stress because our son or daughter has done so well that they've got 4 options to go and play in college and be a student athlete, that in my opinion is the best experience you'll have in college, being a student athlete. So even then, it's trying to flip that as a positive of, let's try and look at all of this as a positive in terms of why this is happening, or we just got to navigate through it. And always utilize your coaches and your club to try and minimize the stress. For me, it's as parents, as coaches, yes, we've got to push players because we want to improve them and we want to make them good people and resilient people. We've got to push them, but it's still always got to be fun. And we've also got to find the right balance of reducing pressure on them as well to make sure they can go and perform. These kids have enough pressure already with school, social media, sports, whatever else, comparing themselves to others. We've got to make sure we try and alleviate pressure and stress on kids. And I think that's a big thing that gets missed in development. We talk about technical, tactical, this, that, the other. It's also about that holistic development of people as well, and making sure we're doing our job to make sure they are enjoying it. It's naive to think they're going to enjoy it all the time, right? There are times when they've had difficult days and they're going to struggle and whatever else.
It's okay for things to feel hard sometimes.
Exactly. But in the main, we've got to make sure that they want to keep coming back, right? And even in a kid's development, they might go through a spell where they're like, I'm not sure if I want to play anymore, right? And then they might find a love for it again, and that's okay too. Going through things. It's just helping them navigate through that and those stresses that they have to deal with.
No, I totally appreciate that. And I think that's a very real set of advice. So thank you for taking us through the landscape. I can tell you as a parent of a young child, I would barely even know where to start.
Yeah.
And what do all these leagues mean and what do they do? And how do I can tell one from the other? It's a daunting task to start when you haven't done it yet, for sure. And having this is a very helpful point to, springboard from for a lot of parents, I'm sure. And like you said, I think what's most important is, do your research, kind of understand what each club brings to the table, and then doing your due diligence. Like you said, go watch a session, talk to one of the directors, get a feel, because we all kind of know what environments our child thrives under or needs to, help them build themselves up. And so I think taking that multidimensional approach and understanding what your options are in front of you and then engaging the club will lead you to likely have the best starting success point for your kids' club career. So I appreciate you walking us through that, because these are things I barely even know, and I am on the fields every other week.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, Lauren, as well, it's also like you talked on about doing the due diligence and your research and, talking to people, talking to other parents at other clubs, right? It's huge as well to get their perspective. But it's also, when as clubs, we probably shouldn't say this because we want everybody to join us. But ultimately, when you make your decision, the decision that you make, even if it's the wrong one, it can still be undone, right? And very rarely you're going to make a decision which is going to hugely negatively impact your son, right? Maybe it's not the right fit for 6 months or a year, but especially at these younger ages, the beauty of it is any decision that you make, it can always be undone, and you can take him somewhere else at some point, right? And even if he didn't enjoy that, it can still be a learning experience because you still will have learned something from it that, okay, that environment wasn't for us. Okay. And we now know that, right? Don't get so stressed about it. Don't worry about the decision so much, because if you make a wrong decision, it can always be undone, right? And it shouldn't negatively impact your son's development for the long term. If you stay in there too long, maybe it does, but you can always undo a wrong decision.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a marriage. Yeah, no, and it's just a good moment of perspective to have that, you start somewhere, you may not end up there, or you may stay there your entire career, and that's all okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's really sound advice to kind of leave people with too, is that, you do your research, do the best you can, you learn what's the right fit for your child and where they are most successful, and you run with it.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, Ben. I really appreciate this. And I look forward to, I'm sure we'll have another podcast again, maybe intercontinental again. I don't know. We'll see. To be determined. But thank you for your time. And we look forward to having everyone else back for another episode of the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for having me.